never thought I'd be the one to tell you this story. But someone has to. Someone who understands what it means to lose everything, to watch evil hide behind a smile, to realize too late that monsters don't always look like monsters. My name is Margaret, and I'm going to tell you about my daughter, Kelly Ann Bates. This isn't just another true crime story you'll forget by tomorrow. This is a warning. This is a promise. This is the truth about how a beautiful, bright-eyed girl was stolen from the world, and how I made sure her killer would never forget her name. Before I begin, I need you to do something. If you have a daughter, a sister, a friend who might be in danger, someone you've lost touch with because of a relationship that didn't feel right, I need you to share this story. Subscribe to this channel because stories like Kelly's need to be told. Not for entertainment, but for survival. Can you do that? Can you help me make sure this never happens again? Now let me take you back to where it all began. The first time I held Kelly Ann, I counted her fingers 3 times, not because I thought something was wrong. I just couldn't believe something so perfect could be mine. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a face that looked like it had been carved from starlight. That was April 17th, 1978. And from that moment forward, my entire world revolved around this tiny human who had chosen me to be her mother. Kelly wasn't just beautiful, she was alive in a way that made everyone around her feel more awake. When she laughed, which was often, it sounded like bells. When she walked into a room, even as a toddler, people noticed. Not because she demanded attention, but because joy radiated from her like heat from the sun. She loved animals with a fierce protectiveness. Once, when she was 7, she found a bird with a broken wing in our garden in Manchester. She insisted we take it to a vet, paid for with her birthday money. She named it Jasper and cried for 3 days when it died. But those tears weren't bitter. At least he knew someone loved him at the end, she told me, her small face serious. That's what matters, Mom. Being loved. God, how those words would haunt me later. As Kelly grew, so did her independence. She was stubborn. I'll admit that freely. When she believed in something, you couldn't shake her loose from it with a crowbar. At 14, she decided she wanted to be a veterinarian. She plastered her room with pictures of horses and dogs, studied every night until her eyes went red, talked endlessly about the life she was going to build. She had friends everywhere. The phone never stopped ringing. Sarah, Emma, Joanne, a rotating cast of giggling girls who would pile into our tiny sitting room, painting their nails and talking about boys they'd never date and dreams that felt as big as the sky. But Kelly was also gentle, sensitive. She felt things deeply, wore her heart on the outside of her body like an open wound. When her father left us when she was 12, she didn't rage or rebel. She just became quieter, more careful with herself, like she'd learned that the world could take things away without warning. "Do you think I'm lovable, Mom?" she asked me one night, 2 years after he'd gone. "Kelly Ann Bates, you are the most lovable creature that ever drew breath," I told her, pulling her close. "Don't you ever question that?" She nodded against my shoulder, but I felt something uncertain in the way she held herself, like she didn't quite believe me, like she was looking for proof. I should have paid more attention to that. I should have realized that a girl looking for proof of love is a girl in danger. The year was 1993. Kelly was 14, vibrant, full of plans. She just started at a new school, was making new friends, was talking about getting a Saturday job at the pet store down the road. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. And then she met him, James Patterson Smith. I didn't know his name yet, didn't know he existed. Kelly hadn't mentioned him, hadn't brought him around. But somewhere in the fabric of that ordinary year, their paths crossed, and the trajectory of my daughter's life changed forever. I've spent years trying to pinpoint the exact moment. Was it at the market? On the bus? Through someone who should have known better? I've driven myself half mad with the wondering, tracing and retracing Kelly's steps through those months, looking for the moment when the monster first smiled at her. But it doesn't matter, does it? What matters is that he saw her. What matters is that he recognized something in my beautiful, sensitive, love-hungry daughter that he could exploit. What matters is that evil doesn't announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. It announces itself with attention, with kindness, with the exact words a lonely girl needs to hear. At night, I still see her as she was then, 14 and perfect and whole. I see her painting her nails that particular shade of purple she loved. I see her dancing around the kitchen to the radio. I see her sleeping in on Sundays, her hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink. I see her alive, and I hold on to those images like they're the only things keeping me from drowning. Because what came after, what he did to her, that's darkness so complete, it has its own gravity. But I promised I'd tell you this story. I promised I'd make you understand. So let me tell you about the day everything changed. The day my daughter came home and told me about her new friend. The day I met the man who would kill her. It was a Saturday in late autumn 1993. I remember because the leaves were falling in that relentless way they do in Manchester, turning to brown slush on the pavements, making everything look tired. I was making tea when Kelly came through the door with an expression I'd never seen before. Something between defiance and excitement, like a child about to confess they've stolen biscuits, but isn't sorry about it. "Mom, I've met someone," she said, "a friend. He's really nice, really understanding." My stomach dropped, though I couldn't have told you why. Kelly had mentioned boys before, little crushes, nothing serious. But something in her voice was different this time. Older, secretive. "Oh?" I tried to sound casual, continuing to stir milk into my tea. "Someone from school?" She hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "No, just someone I met. He's been really helpful, actually, giving me advice about things. He's smart, Mom, really smart." "How old is this helpful smart person?" I kept my voice light, but my hands had gone cold. Another hesitation. "Does it matter? Age is just a number, isn't it? What matters is how people treat each other." I turned to face her fully then. My daughter, 14 years old, standing in our kitchen with her chin lifted in that stubborn way of hers, defending someone I hadn't even met yet. "Kelly, how old?" "He's older. But it's not like that, Mom. He's just a friend. He listens to me. Actually listens, you know? Like what I say matters." Every alarm bell in my body was screaming, but I also knew my daughter. Push too hard, and she'd push back harder. Kelly didn't respond well to demands. She needed to be guided, convinced, shown rather than told. "I'd like to meet him," I said carefully. "This friend who's so understanding." Her face shuddered immediately. "Maybe, eventually, I wanted to tell you about him first. I knew you'd react like this." "Like what?" Like I can't make my own decisions, like I'm still a baby. You're 14, love. Exactly. Not 4, 14. Old enough to know who I want to spend time with. We stared at each other across the kitchen, my daughter and I felt the first hairline fracture in the foundation of our relationship. I didn't know then that this fracture would become a chasm. I didn't know that this conversation was the beginning of losing her. I tried a different approach. What's his name? She relaxed slightly. James Smith. She'd used his middle name, I learned later. Already he was teaching her to lie by omission. He's kind, Mum. He makes me feel like I matter. Like I'm not just some stupid kid that nobody takes seriously. You've always mattered, Kelly. You know that. Do I? Her eyes were suddenly bright with unshed tears. Dad didn't think so. He left, didn't he? Just left. Like we were nothing. And there it was. The wound I'd known was there but hadn't realized was still bleeding. My daughter's father had abandoned us, and she'd internalized it as evidence of her own unworthiness. She was walking around with this gaping hole inside her, desperate for someone to prove she was worth staying for, and James Patterson Smith had found that hole and crawled inside it. I wish I could tell you I handled it perfectly, that I said exactly the right thing to make her see reason. But I was tired, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and I made the mistake of thinking this was a phase, a crush. Something that would burn bright and fade fast, the way teenage infatuations do. Just be careful, love, I said finally, and I really would like to meet this James eventually, okay? She nodded, but her eyes had gone distant. She'd already left the conversation, already retreated to wherever she went in her head and when she thought about him. The next few weeks were strange. Kelly became careful. She watched what she said around me, measured her words. She started going out more, just to Sarah's or just to the library, but there was a new energy about her, a secretiveness that felt like betrayal. I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself this was normal teenage behavior. What mother doesn't feel their daughter slipping away around this age? It's natural, it's expected, it's how they become their own people. Except it wasn't natural. It wasn't Kelly becoming her own person. It was Kelly being systematically separated from herself, piece by piece, thought by thought, until the girl I knew would be unrecognizable. 3 months after that kitchen conversation, Kelly finally brought him home. It was February 1994, cold enough that I'd lit the fire in the sitting room, and the windows were fogged with condensation. Kelly came through the door with a man behind her, and the first thing I thought was, he's old. Not just older than Kelly, old. Somewhere in his mid-40s, with graying hair and a thick mustache. He wore a shabby jacket and smiled at me with yellowed teeth, extending a hand that was rough and dry. Mrs. Bates, finally. Kelly's told me so much about you. His voice was rough northern, the kind of voice that sounds friendly until you realize it never quite reaches the eyes. James, I said, shaking his hand because what else could I do? My 14-year-old daughter was standing there watching me with an expression that clearly said, "Be nice. Please be nice." "Thanks for having me over," he continued, making himself comfortable on my sofa like he owned it. "Kelly talks about you all the time. Says you're the most important person in her life." He knew exactly what to say, I'll give him that. He'd studied Kelly, learned her, understood that the way to keep her was to not create an enemy of me, not yet anyway. So he played the role of the respectful, slightly awkward older friend who just wanted Kelly to be happy. We had tea, we made small talk. He told me he worked in construction, that he'd known some hard times but was getting back on his feet. He said he thought Kelly was remarkably mature for her age and that he appreciated having someone who could hold a real conversation. Every word was a trap. Every smile was bait. And Kelly sat there, glowing with pride that her two worlds were meeting, completely unaware that she'd brought a predator into our home. After that first meeting, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind churning through everything I'd observed. James Patterson Smith was at least 30 years older than my daughter. He'd looked at her with an expression that made my skin crawl. Not quite sexual, which might have been easier to name and fight, but possessive. Like she was a thing he'd acquired, a prize he'd won. The next morning, I confronted Kelly before school. "He's too old for you." She was eating toast, and she didn't even look up. "We're just friends, Mom. I told you. Friends don't look at each other the way he looks at you." Now she did look up, and her eyes were hard, older than they should have been. "You don't know how he looks at me. You don't know anything about us." "Us?" "Kelly, there is no us. You're 14. He's a grown man." "So what?" "He treats me like an adult. He respects my opinions. We talk about real things, philosophy, life, stuff that actually matters, not just stupid teenage drama." "You are a teenager, drama and all. That's normal. Talking to middle-aged men is not normal." She stood up, her breakfast abandoned. "I knew you wouldn't understand. I knew you'd be just like everyone else, judging something you don't understand." "He said you would." That stopped me cold. "He said I would? What else has he said about me?" Kelly's face flushed. "Nothing, just that parents don't always understand that their children are growing up, or that they hold on too tight because they're scared of being alone." Those weren't Kelly's words. They were too calculated, too precisely designed to hit my weakest point. James had been coaching her, preparing her for exactly this conversation. "Kelly, listen to me." "No, you listen to me for once." Her voice cracked with emotion. "My whole life, everyone's left. Dad left. My friends are all moving on, getting boyfriends, having lives. And then I meet someone who actually sees me, who actually thinks I'm worth spending time with, and you want to ruin it like you ruin everything." The words hit like physical blows. I actually stepped back. "I don't want to ruin anything," I said quietly. "I want to protect you. I don't need protecting. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Can you just let me have this one thing?" What could I say? How could I explain that my every instinct was screaming danger, that I could smell wrongness coming off James Smith like smoke, that I knew he was hurting her somehow even though I couldn't yet see the wounds? "I love you," I said instead. "Everything I do is because I love you." She softened slightly. "I love you too, Mom. I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing." But she didn't. God help us both, she didn't. Over the next months, Kelly transformed, not all at once, that would have been too obvious, but gradually, like a photograph fading in reverse. She became less vibrant, less Kelly. She stopped talking about becoming a veterinarian, stopped plastering her walls with animal pictures. When I asked about it, she shrugged. "James thinks I should be more realistic. Vet school is expensive, and I'm not exactly the best student. Maybe I should think about something more practical. James thinks. James says. James believes. Her friends stopped calling. When I asked why, she said they were immature, that she'd outgrown them, that James had helped her see that real friendship was about quality, not quantity. She started dressing differently, less color, more black. She covered up, wearing long sleeves even in warm weather. When I questioned it, she said she was going through a phase, that it was her choice, that I needed to stop being so controlling. Controlling. Another word that didn't sound like Kelly. I tried reaching out to authorities, but what could I report? My teenage daughter had an older friend. They talked. He hadn't touched her, or so Kelly insisted. There was no evidence of abuse, no proof of wrongdoing. She's a teenager, a police officer told me with barely concealed condescension. They rebel. They have older friends sometimes. Unless there's evidence of a sexual relationship or violence, there's nothing we can do. Talk to her. Be involved in her life. But Kelly was making that impossible. She was withdrawing, pulling away, and every time I reached for her, she slipped further from my grasp. By her 16th birthday in April 1994, she'd stopped pretending James was just a friend. "We're together," she announced over birthday cake. "Properly together. I love him, Mom, and he loves me. We're going to be together forever." Forever. She said it with such certainty, such faith, I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "You're 16, Kelly. You don't know what forever means yet." "I know more than you think. James has been through things. He understands pain. He understands me. We're the same, him and me, both damaged, both trying to find someone who won't leave. I never left you. You're my mother. You have to stay. That's different." How had we gotten here? How had my bright, joyful daughter become this hollow-eyed girl who spoke about damage like it was something to aspire to? The answer, of course, was James. Day by day, conversation by conversation, he'd been rewriting her, telling her that pain was connection, that jealousy was love, that isolation was protection, that she was special, damaged, different, and that only he could understand her. He was grooming her, conditioning her, preparing her for what came next. The day Kelly moved out is burned into my memory with the clarity of trauma. It was November 1995. She was 17 years old, still legally a child, but old enough to make decisions I couldn't reverse. She came home from wherever she'd been, she rarely told me anymore, and started packing a bag with jerky mechanical movements. "What are you doing?" I asked, though I already knew. Had known this was coming, had felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon. "I'm moving in with James." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "I love him and I want to be with him. You can't stop me." "Kelly, please. Please think about this. You're 17. You have school. You have your whole life. I've already left school." She didn't look at me, just kept folding clothes with precise, angry movements. It was pointless anyway. James is going to take care of me. We're going to build a life together. "What kind of life?" "Kelly, he's unemployed. He lives in a council flat. How is he going to take care of you when he can't even take care of himself?" Now she did look at me, and her eyes were cold. So cold. At least he wants me around. At least he doesn't make me feel like I'm a burden every single day. "You've never been a burden, Kelly. You're my daughter. You're my whole world." "No, I'm not. I'm your project, your second chance. You want me to be who you couldn't be, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of disappointing you just by being myself." Where had this come from? This narrative where I was the villain and she was the victim? I'd worked myself to the bone to provide for her, loved her with every cell in my body, and somehow James had convinced her I was her prison guard. "He's manipulating you," I tried one last time. "Can't you see that? He's isolated you from your friends, made you leave school, turned you against me. This is what abusers do, Kelly. They make you dependent." She laughed. Actually laughed. "You're so predictable, Mom. James said you'd say that. He said you'd try to make him the bad guy because you can't handle that I'm choosing him over you. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to think, to wait, to give yourself time to... I'm done waiting. I'm done being treated like a child. I'm leaving, and you can either accept it and we can have a relationship, or you can keep fighting me and lose me completely. Your choice." It wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum delivered with James's words in Kelly's mouth. She left that night with 2 bags of clothes and the stuffed elephant I'd given her when she was 6. She walked out our door, climbed into James's car, a rusted thing that barely ran, and drove away from me. I stood at the window and watched the taillights disappear, and I knew with terrible certainty that I'd just lost my daughter. But I didn't know yet how completely. I didn't know that the girl who just left was already half ghost, already disappearing into a nightmare I couldn't imagine. The flat James lived in was in Gorton, a rough area of Manchester, in a building that should have been condemned. Later, much later, I would see photographs of it, and my heart would break all over again at the thought of my Kelly living in such squalor. 1 bedroom, stained carpet, windows that didn't close properly, neighbors who minded their own business even when they heard screaming. Perfect for what he had planned. At first, Kelly called me, once a week, then once a month. The conversations were stilted, careful. She'd tell me she was fine, that she and James were happy, that she didn't need anything. Her voice sounded thin over the phone, stretched tight like wire ready to snap. "Can I come see you?" I'd ask. "Not yet. James thinks it's better if we have some space. You know, to let things settle. I'm your mother. I don't need space from you. But I need a space from you." A pause. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I just mean, we need time to build our life without interference." Interference. Another word that didn't sound like Kelly. By early 1996, the calls stopped altogether. I tried phoning the flat, but the number had been disconnected. I went to the address I'd managed to get from one of her old friends, but James wouldn't let me in. He answered the door with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "She doesn't want to see you, Margaret. You need to respect that." I want to hear that from her. And I'm telling you, as her partner, that she's made her wishes clear. You're upsetting her with all this hovering. She needs to focus on us right now, on our future. Let me see her, just for 5 minutes, just to know she's okay. His smile widened. She's more than okay. She's happy, happier than she's ever been. Now I'm going to have to ask you to leave, or I'll call the police for harassment. He closed the door in my face. I stood in that dingy hallway, staring at the peeling paint on his door, and I felt helpless in a way I'd never experienced before. My daughter was on the other side of that door, and I couldn't reach her, couldn't save her, couldn't even see her. I went to the police again, filed a missing persons report, even though technically Kelly wasn't missing. She was 17, nearly 18, and living where she chose. "She's an adult, Mrs. Bates," they told me, "or near enough. If she doesn't want contact with you, that's her right. She's with a man twice her age who won't let me see her. Has he hurt her? I don't know. He won't let me see her. Without evidence of abuse, our hands are tied. Evidence. They needed evidence. But how could I get evidence when I was locked out of my daughter's life? I became that mother, the one hanging around her daughter's building, hoping for a glimpse, the one asking neighbors if they'd seen her, if she seemed okay. Most ignored me. One elderly woman pulled me aside. I hear things, she whispered, from that flat. Crying, shouting, things breaking. But it's not my business, is it? People have rows. What kind of crying? She looked uncomfortable. The bad kind. The kind that sounds like someone's soul breaking. But I could be wrong. Sound travels strange in these old buildings. I want you to pause here and think about something. Think about everyone who heard my daughter suffering and did nothing. Think about how many times evil succeeds because good people decide it's not their business. What would you have done? Would you have called the police? Would you have knocked on the door? Or would you have turned up the television and told yourself it wasn't your problem? Leave a comment. Tell me honestly. Because this is the moment where Kelly needed someone, anyone, to care enough to act. For 2 years, I lived in a special kind of hell. The hell of not knowing, the hell of imagining. The hell of being unable to protect your child from a monster you can't reach. I kept working, kept getting up every morning, kept Kelly's room exactly as she'd left it, like a shrine to a girl who was still alive but already lost to me. I talked to her in my head, constant conversations where I tried to convince her to come home, to see reason, to remember who she'd been before James. Sometimes I'd drive by the flat, just to see it, just to feel closer to her. I'd sit in my car and stare at those grimy windows and try to sense her presence, try to send her love through the brick and glass and distance. I didn't know that by then, late 1996, Kelly was already trapped. Not just emotionally, but physically. James had begun locking her in, taking her shoes so she couldn't leave, disconnecting the phone so she couldn't call for help. I didn't know he'd begun the physical abuse, that he was burning her with cigarettes, hitting her, pulling out her hair, breaking her fingers one by one. I didn't know because Kelly had been trained to hide it, trained to protect him, trained to believe she deserved it. The few neighbors who saw her in those years said she looked like a ghost, pale, painfully thin, moving slowly like everything hurt. She wore long sleeves and high necks even in summer. Her hair was lank and unwashed. Her eyes were empty. But no one did anything. No one called the police. No one knocked on my door to tell me my daughter was dying by degrees in that flat. Not their business. In March 1999, I got a letter. My hands shook so badly I could barely open it. Dear Mom, I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. I know you're worried, but you don't need to be. James and I are fine. We're happy. I just wanted you to know I'm okay and I'm thinking about you. I love you. Kelly. The handwriting was Kelly's, but the words felt wrong. Too formal, too distant. Like a hostage letter, which is essentially what it was. I wrote back immediately, begged her to call me, to visit, to give me some sign she was really okay. I sent the letter to the flat address and waited. No response. I sent another and another. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, letters saying I loved her, I wasn't angry, I just wanted to see her, to know she was safe. Nothing. By early 2000, I was frantic. Kelly was 21 now, a full adult, but I could feel in my bones that something was wrong. Mothers know. We know. I went to the flat again in March, knocked on the door until my knuckles bled. A neighbor came out and told me James and his girlfriend still lived there, but she rarely saw the girl anymore. She used to take the rubbish out sometimes, but I haven't seen her in months. Maybe they broke up? Maybe they broke up. Maybe she'd left. Maybe she was safe somewhere, starting over, and hadn't told me because she was embarrassed or angry or needed space. I clung to these maybes like lifelines. On April 16th, 2000, the day before Kelly's 22nd birthday, I bought a cake. Her favorite, chocolate with strawberry icing. I put it in my car and drove to the flat one more time, determined to give her this small piece of normalcy. This small reminder that I still loved her, still remembered, still held space for her in my life. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again and again. Finally, I heard movement inside. The door opened a crack and James peered out. He looked worse than I remembered. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, a smell coming off him like rot. "What?" he said. "It's Kelly's birthday tomorrow. I brought a cake. I just want to give it to her." "She doesn't want to see you." "Then let her tell me that herself." "She's sleeping." "I'll wait." His eyes narrowed. "You need to stop harassing us. Kelly's made her choice. Accept it and move on with your life." "I'll move on when I see my daughter with my own eyes and hear her tell me she's okay." For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Fear? Calculation? Then it was gone, replaced by his usual cold smile. "Fine, but not today. She's not well. Come back next week and you can see her. I promise." He closed the door. I stood there with Kelly's birthday cake in my hands, and every instinct I had screamed not to leave, to kick down the door, to call the police, to do something. But I didn't. God forgive me, I didn't. I believed him. I believed I had one more week, and then I'd see my daughter. I drove home with the cake and put it in the refrigerator, planning to bring it back the following week for a belated celebration. The next day was Kelly's birthday, April 17th, 2000. I woke up early, as I always did on her birthday, and whispered "Happy birthday, baby girl" to the empty air, hoping somehow she could hear me. I didn't know that Kelly was already dead. I didn't know that the day before, when I'd been knocking on that door with her birthday cake in my hands, my daughter's body had been lying on the floor inside that flat, destroyed beyond recognition by weeks of torture. I didn't know that while I'd been talking to her killer, asking to see her, believing his promise of next week, she'd been gone. I didn't know that I would never see her alive again. That knowledge came 2 days later, on April 19th, when the police knocked on my door. I saw the police through the window before they knocked. 2 of them in uniform, with expressions that police only wear when they're about to destroy someone's world. I knew before I opened the door. The way you know things in nightmares. The way your body understands catastrophe before your mind can process it. I opened the door anyway, because what choice did I have? "Mrs. Bates? Margaret Bates?" "Yes." "May we come in?" I stepped aside. They entered my home, these strangers who were about to hand me the worst news a parent can receive, and I offered them tea, because that's what you do. That's what Kelly would have wanted. Politeness in the face of everything. "Perhaps you should sit down," one of them said. "Just tell me." My voice didn't sound like mine. "Is it Kelly?" "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Bates. Your daughter Kelly Ann Bates was found deceased in a residence in Gorton on April 17th. The words hit me, but they didn't make sense. Deceased. Found. April 17th, her birthday. That can't be right, I heard myself saying. I was just there. Just 2 days ago, I spoke to James. He said she was sleeping. He said I could see her next week. The officers exchanged glances. James Patterson Smith has been arrested and charged with murder. Murder. The room tilted. Or maybe I did. One of the officers caught me before I fell, guided me to the sofa, and suddenly I was sitting in my own living room being told that my daughter, my Kelly, my beautiful girl, who'd counted birds' heartbeats and dreamed of saving animals, was dead. Murdered. How? I whispered. Mrs. Bates, perhaps we should discuss this at another time. How? They told me. Not everything. They spared me the worst details in that moment, but enough. Enough to understand that Kelly had been tortured, that she'd suffered, that her death had been slow and agonizing and inflicted by the man she has loved. I remember screaming. I remember one of the officers holding me while I screamed and screamed, like I could scream Kelly back to life. Like I could scream hard enough to rewind time to that day I'd let her walk out my door. Later, hours or days later, time had stopped meaning anything. They told me more. Told me they'd need me to identify the body. Warned me gently that it would be difficult, that Kelly had been badly injured, that I should prepare myself. I'm her mother, I said. I'll know her. But I was wrong. The thing they showed me in that morgue wasn't my daughter. Couldn't be my daughter. It was too broken, too damaged, too far removed from anything human, let alone the girl who'd giggled over nail polish and cried over broken birds. They'd warned me, tried to prepare me, but there's no preparing for this. No words in any language that can ready a mother to see what I saw. Kelly's face was so swollen and beaten I couldn't distinguish her features. Her eyes were swollen shut. Her lips were split and blackened. Her hair, her beautiful dark hair, had been pulled out in clumps, leaving raw, bleeding patches of scalp. But it was her body that broke me completely. She weighed less than 80 pounds. Every inch of her visible skin was covered in burns, cuts, bruises, and various stages of healing. Her hands were mutilated, fingers broken and healed wrong, nails torn out. Her legs showed signs of stab wounds. Burns from cigarettes covered her arms, legs, torso in a grotesque pattern. Later, I would learn the full horror. That over the course of weeks, possibly months, James Patterson Smith had systematically tortured my daughter. He'd burned her with an iron, stabbed her with screwdrivers and knives, dripped hot wax on her skin, stomped on her until he broke her ribs. He'd gouged out one of her eyes while she was still alive. He'd scalded her, mutilated her genitals, beaten her with his fists and feet, and anything else he could find. He'd tied her up, starved her, forced her to sleep in her own waste. For at least 4 weeks before her death, possibly longer, Kelly had been in constant, unimaginable agony. And through it all, she'd been alone. Trapped in that flat with her torturer. No one had come. No one had saved her. Not even me. I'm sorry, I whispered to the broken thing on the table that used to be my daughter. I'm so sorry, baby. I should have saved you. I should have broken down that door. I should have done something, anything. But she was beyond hearing, beyond saving, beyond everything but silence. They asked if I could confirm it was Kelly, if I recognized anything that could positively identify her. I looked at her left ankle. where a small birthmark shaped like a heart had been since birth. It was still there, amidst all the damage and horror. Still there. "It's her," I said. "It's my Kelly." And then I collapsed. The trial began in November 2000. I attended every single day, sitting in that courtroom watching the man who'd murdered my daughter, needing him to see me, needing him to face at least one person who would bear witness to what he'd done. James Patterson Smith sat in the defendant's box, looking bored. Sometimes he smirked, sometimes he yawned. He showed no remorse, no shame, no humanity whatsoever. The prosecution laid out a timeline of horror. Kelly had moved in with him in November 1995, when she was 17. At first, the abuse had been psychological, isolating her, undermining her confidence, making her dependent on him. Then came the physical abuse. It started small, a slap, a shove, things he could pass off as accidents or her fault. "She's clumsy," he told neighbors who'd heard crashes, "always walking into things." By 1997, Kelly was his prisoner. He'd taken her shoes, her coat, anything she could use to escape. He'd disconnected the phone. He'd told her that if she left, he'd kill her family. He'd convinced her that no one wanted her anyway, that I'd given up on her, that she was worthless to everyone but him. Neighbors testified to hearing screaming, to seeing Kelly looking increasingly thin and pale on her rare appearances, to hearing James shouting at her, calling her vile names, threatening her, but no one had done anything. "I thought it was just a bad relationship," one neighbor said on the stand. "You know how couples are. I didn't think it was my place to interfere." The doctor who'd performed Kelly's autopsy testified. "I shouldn't have stayed for this testimony, but I did. I needed to hear it. Needed to understand what my daughter had endured." He described over 150 separate injuries, burns covering more than 75% of her body, multiple broken bones, some old, some new, evidence of prolonged starvation and dehydration, stab wounds, ligature marks from being tied up for extended periods. Her eye had been gouged out at least a week before her death. She'd lived with that agony for a week. In the final weeks of her life, James had escalated. The prosecution believed he'd known he couldn't keep her alive much longer, that the damage was too severe. So he'd tortured her with increasing brutality, knowing she wouldn't survive to tell anyone. He'd stabbed her repeatedly, beaten her with a shower head, drowned her in a bathtub and revived her over and over, burned her with scalding water. The final cause of death was drowning. He'd held her underwater in the bathtub until she stopped fighting. Until my daughter, my Kelly, who'd loved life so much it radiated from her like light, had given up and let herself die, just to make the pain stop. And then he'd left her body on the floor for 3 days before calling the police, claiming she died in the bathtub and he'd panicked. The defense tried to claim Kelly had been a willing participant in some sort of sadomasochistic relationship, that she'd enjoyed the abuse, that it was consensual. I vomited in the courtroom when they suggested this, actually got sick right there, hearing my daughter's torture described as some sort of sexual game she'd wanted. The prosecution destroyed this argument easily. No one consents to having their eye gouged out. No one consents to torture that leaves them weighing 77 pounds. No one consents to being held prisoner and murdered. Kelly's doctor testified that she'd been in to see him multiple times over the years with injuries, broken fingers, burns, bruising. Each time she'd made excuses. I fell. I'm clumsy. I walked into a door. Each time he'd documented it, but he'd believed her excuses, or chosen to believe them, because confronting the alternative would have meant getting involved. I failed her, he said on the stand, and it was the only honest thing I heard from anyone in that trial except the prosecution. The trial lasted weeks, week after week of hearing about my daughter's suffering, of seeing photographs of her injuries that would haunt me forever, of watching James smirk and yawn and show less emotion than if they'd been discussing the weather. I testified, told the court about Kelly before, about the bright, loving, joyful girl she'd been, about how James had isolated her, changed her, destroyed her piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a victim waiting to die. When I finished, I looked directly at James. He looked back at me with those dead, empty eyes, and he smiled. That's when I knew that killing Kelly hadn't been enough for him. He'd wanted to kill me too. Not literally, he was too much of a coward for that, but spiritually. He'd wanted to destroy my daughter in front of me slowly, while I was unable to save her. He'd wanted me to live with the knowledge that she died in agony, alone, calling for help that never came. He thought he'd won, but he was wrong. The verdict came on November 28, 2000. I sat in that courtroom with my hands folded in my lap, surrounded by friends and family, waiting to hear if the jury would understand what James Patterson Smith truly was. Guilty of murder. He didn't react. Just sat there with that same bored expression, like this was all a minor inconvenience. The sentencing came immediately after. Life in prison with a minimum of 20 years before parole eligibility. 20 years. My daughter had suffered unimaginable torture for years, had died in agony, and her murderer might walk free someday, might breathe air and see sunlight and taste food and experience all the things Kelly would never experience again. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was all the justice this world could give me. As they led him away, I stood up. I wanted him to see me standing. Wanted him to know I wasn't broken, wasn't destroyed. He glanced at me as they walked him past, and I said loud enough for him to hear, "She's free of you now, and I'm going to make sure no one ever forgets what you are." For just a second, his composure cracked. Just a flicker of something, rage, fear, in those dead eyes. Then he was gone, and I was left standing in that courtroom with everyone staring at me. I'd made him a promise, now I had to keep it. The case made national news. The details were so horrific that even hardened reporters struggled to describe them. Kelly's story became a symbol of domestic abuse gone to its darkest extreme, of how victims can be hidden in plain sight, of how many people have to fail before a woman dies alone in a torture chamber. I became the public face of Kelly's story. I gave interviews, painful as they were. I spoke at domestic violence awareness events. I worked with charities trying to help women escape abusive situations. Every time I spoke, I told people about Kelly before, about the girl she'd been, not just the victim she'd become. I showed photographs of her smiling, healthy, full of life. I wanted people to understand that this could happen to anyone, that victims don't start out broken. They're broken by their abusers, systematically and deliberately. I also talked about the failures, the neighbors who'd heard her screaming and done nothing, the doctors who'd accepted her excuses about injuries, the police who'd told me they couldn't help. because there was no evidence. The system that had let my daughter die. Some people called me brave. I wasn't. I was just a mother who'd failed to save her daughter, trying to save someone else's daughter instead. Years passed. The sharp edge of grief dulled into a constant ache. I learned to live with it the way you learn to live with a missing limb, aware of it constantly, but able to function around it. I visited Kelly's grave every week, brought her flowers, told her about my day, apologized over and over for not saving her, and I monitored James Patterson Smith's case obsessively. In 2020, 20 years after Kelly's death, he became eligible for parole. I attended the hearing. He was older now, grayer, but still with those same dead eyes. He'd claimed to have found religion in prison, claimed to be reformed, claimed to regret what he'd done. He was lying. I could see it. The parole board could see it. Parole denied. He would remain in prison for at least another few years before he could apply again. I stood up after the verdict, caught his eye, and mouthed, "Kelly's still winning." His face twisted with rage. Good. Let him rage. Let him rot in that cell, knowing that the girl he'd tried to erase from the world was still more powerful dead than he would ever be alive. But my revenge wasn't just about keeping him in prison. It was bigger than that. In 2001, I'd started the Kelly Ann Bates Foundation, dedicated to helping young women recognize and escape abusive relationships. We provided education in schools, resources for victims, training for police, and medical professionals to spot the signs of abuse. We'd helped thousands of women, saved lives, given people the tools to escape before it was too late. Every woman we saved was my revenge. Every life we changed was proof that James hadn't won, that Kelly's death meant something, that she mattered. The foundation grew. We expanded across the UK, then into Europe. Kelly's story became a cautionary tale taught in schools. Her name became synonymous with the hidden dangers of domestic abuse. James Patterson Smith had tried to make my daughter disappear. Instead, he'd made her immortal. That was my revenge, not violence, not hatred, but transformation. Taking the worst thing that had ever happened and turning it into something that saved others. Kelly couldn't be saved, but because of her, thousands of others could be. I'm 73 years old now. My hair is white, my hands shake, and some mornings I wake up and forget, just for a moment, that Kelly's gone. Then I remember, and the grief hits fresh, like it just happened yesterday. But I'm still here, still fighting, still telling her story. Last month I spoke at a university, hundreds of young people, Kelly's age and younger, listening as I told them about my daughter, about how a bright, loving girl became a prisoner, about how she died alone while people who could have helped turned away. After the talk, a young woman approached me. She was crying. "I'm in a relationship like that," she whispered. "He doesn't hit me, but everything else you described. The isolation, the controlling, the making me feel crazy. I thought it was just me. I thought I was overreacting." I took her hands. "You're not, and it will get worse. It always gets worse. I don't know how to leave. I'm scared." "I know, but you have to be more scared of staying. Because if you stay," I didn't finish. Didn't need to. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Will you help me?" "Yes." We connected her with resources that day, a safe house, legal aid, counseling. 6 months later, she sent me a letter. She'd left him. She was rebuilding her life. She was safe. "You saved me," she wrote. "You and Kelly saved my life." I cried when I read that letter, Cried for the daughter I'd lost and the daughter I'd saved. Cried for all the years of pain and all the small victories that made it bearable. This is what I do now. This is my purpose. I'm an old woman racing against time, trying to save as many people as I can before I join Kelly wherever she is. Some days I'm tired. So tired I can barely stand. But I think about Kelly in that flat, enduring torture beyond imagining, and I find the strength to keep going. Because if she could survive what she survived for as long as she did, I can survive this. The foundation has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We have offices in 12 countries now, helplines, support networks, educational programs. We've worked with governments to change laws, making it easier to prosecute abusers and protect victims. Kelly's law, passed in 2003, made coercive control a criminal offense in the UK. Abusers could now be prosecuted for isolating their victims, controlling their finances, undermining their mental health, all the things James did to Kelly before he ever raised a fist to her. My daughter's death changed the law, changed how we understand and fight domestic abuse, changed countless lives. If that's not revenge, I don't know what is. But it's not enough. It will never be enough. Because Kelly is still dead, and I'm still here without her. There are days I rage, days I scream at God or fate or whatever force allowed this to happen. Days I fantasize about visiting James in prison and watching him suffer the way Kelly suffered. But those days pass, and I return to the work. To telling Kelly's story, to saving the next girl and the next. People ask me how I forgive, how I move on, how I find peace. I don't. I don't forgive James Patterson Smith. I hope he suffers every day for the rest of his miserable life. I hope he dies alone and afraid, the way Kelly did. I hope whatever afterlife exists holds punishments I can't even imagine for what he did. I haven't moved on. I'm still that mother, standing outside that flat with a birthday cake, knocking on the door, not knowing my daughter is already dead on the other side. And I have no peace. Peace is for people who didn't fail their children. I carry Kelly's death with me every moment of every day, a weight that never lightens, never shifts. But I have purpose. I have meaning. I have a reason to get up every morning and keep fighting. And I have hope. Not for me, I'll carry this pain to my grave. But hope that the work we're doing will mean fewer mothers have to stand where I've stood. Fewer daughters have to die the way Kelly died. That's my revenge, my redemption, my reason. Last week was Kelly's 46th birthday. I went to her grave, as I always do, and I told her about all the lives we've saved in her name. All the women who are alive because her story taught them to recognize danger. All the changes we've made. I hope you're proud, baby girl. I whispered to her headstone. I hope wherever you are, you can see what we've done. What you've done. The wind picked up, rustling the flowers I'd brought. And just for a moment, I felt something, a warmth, a presence, a sense that Kelly was there, listening, understanding. Maybe I imagined it. Probably I did. Grief makes us see what we need to see, but I choose to believe she was there, that she knows, that she sees what her death has become. Not just a tragedy, but a catalyst for change. That's the story I tell myself to survive. Today I'm sitting in my living room, the same living room where police once told me my daughter was dead, recording this story. My hands are shaking the way they always do when I talk about Kelly, but I'm determined to get this right. Because this is my last testimony, my final accounting. The truth I need you to hear before I'm gone. I'm dying. The doctors have given me 6 months, maybe less. Cancer eating through me the way grief has been eating through me for 24 years. Part of me is relieved. Part of me has been dying since the day Kelly did, and it's about time the rest of me caught up. But before I go, I need to finish this. Need to tell you what I've learned. What Kelly's death taught me about evil, about love, about the terrible fragility of the world we live in. Evil is real. Not supernatural, not dramatic, just human. James Patterson Smith was evil in the most banal way possible. An inadequate man who could only feel powerful by destroying someone weaker. A coward who found a vulnerable girl and slowly, methodically, broke her into pieces. There was nothing special about him, nothing unique. There are thousands like him walking among us, looking for victims, looking for girls like Kelly, sensitive, kind, damaged enough to believe they deserve abuse. That's what keeps me up at night. Not just Kelly's death, but the knowledge that it's happening again right now. Somewhere, a man is isolating a woman. Somewhere, a girl is being taught to believe abuse is love. Somewhere, a mother is losing her daughter and doesn't even know it yet. But I also learned about love. Real love. The kind that doesn't die when the person does. I love Kelly as much today as I did the moment I first held her. Death didn't end that love. Nothing can end it. And I learned that we fail each other constantly. Kelly's neighbors failed her, her doctors failed her, the police failed her, society failed her, I failed her. I can dress it up in pretty words, can talk about how I tried, how the system prevented me from helping, how James had trapped her so completely there was nothing I could do. But the truth is simpler and uglier. Zal, I let my daughter walk out that door. I let her go to him. I waited for permission to save her instead of kicking down doors and dragging her to safety. I was civilized, polite, respectful of boundaries. And my daughter died because of it. So here's what I need you to understand. What I need you to take from Kelly's story. If someone you love is in danger, break the rules. Kick down doors. Make a scene. Be the crazy one. Be the interfering one. Be whatever you have to be to save them. Because polite society will tell you to respect boundaries, to not interfere, to mind your own business. And polite society will let your loved one die while you wait for the proper moment to act. If I could go back, I would have broken into that flat. I would have kidnapped Kelly if I had to. I would have done whatever it took, legal or illegal, to get her away from him. I would have chosen her life over propriety. But I can't go back. I can only go forward for whatever time I have left and tell you, don't make my mistake. Don't be polite when someone's life is on the line. The Kellyanne Bates Foundation will continue after I'm gone. I've made sure of it. There are people in place, funding secured, programs established. Kelly's story will keep saving lives long after I'm dust. That's my legacy. That's what I built from the ashes of my daughter's death. James Patterson Smith is still in prison. He'll likely die there. I won't live to see it, but others will. They'll make sure he's never forgotten, never forgiven, never allowed to pretend he's anything other than what he is. A murderer who tortured a young woman to death because he enjoyed it. And Kelly? Kelly is everywhere. In every woman we save. In every law we change. In every person who hears her story and decides to leave an abusive relationship. In every mother who trusts her instincts and saves her child. She's in the flowers that grow on her grave, in the birds that sing there. In every moment of kindness and courage and love that exists in the world. James tried to erase her. Instead, he immortalized her. That's my revenge. That's my victory. I couldn't save my daughter. But because of her, thousands of others have been saved. Will be saved. Her death meant something. Her life meant something. She mattered. That's what I need you to remember. Not the horror of how she died, but the importance of how she lived and how her death changed the world. I'm tired now. So tired. Ready to rest. Ready to see Kelly again, if there's an afterlife. Ready to hold her and tell her I'm sorry and hear her say, "It's okay, Mom. You did your best. I don't know if I'll get that. Don't know what comes after this. But I choose to hope. Just like I choose to believe that all the pain, all the years of grief and rage and fighting were worth it. That Kelly would be proud of what we've done in her name." That's the story I'm telling myself as I close my eyes for the last time. I'll see you soon, baby girl. Wait for me. I'm Margaret Bates. This is the story of my daughter, Kelly Ann, and how she changed the world even in death. Don't forget her. Don't let anyone else die the way she did. And if someone you love is in danger, save them. Break every rule. Burn every bridge. Do whatever it takes, because I promise you, living with regret for not acting is worse than any consequence of acting. I learned that the hard way. Don't make my mistake. The Kelly Ann Bates Foundation continues to operate today, providing resources and support for victims of domestic abuse. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please reach out for help. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be loved without pain. And you deserve to live. In memory of Kelly Ann Bates, 1978-2000, forever loved, never forgotten.